Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Sam's Healing Podcast. I am joined today by an old friend who, man, we did a video a long time ago. It was fantastic. Our lives have both changed and been through a lot since then, but I'm joined today by Eddie Capparucci. Eddie, how are you? How are things going? And you're in North Carolina where it's a lot cooler than Texas, right?
Yes. Yes, Sam, very much so. I mean, you're going to hit 90 something today. I'm lucky if I hit the low 80s along the way. But things are good. It's been so long since we've been together and we've talked, and I'm really excited about you having me back on.
It is a great joy to have you on. I'm going to give the listener and the viewing audience a little bit of background, and then I'll have you fill in the gaps. But you've written 5 books: Going Deeper, Why Men Struggle to Love, Going Deeper for Women, Removing Your Shame Label, which I just love, Understanding Your Inner Child, and Overcoming Addiction, which we're going to talk more about today. And then you have a new one coming out that you'll talk about, called Going Deeper for the Betrayed Partner. You're also an expert in problematic sexual behavior. You've got quite the resume. So why don't you share with those that maybe didn't see our original video a long time ago, a little bit about what you do, what you love to do, and maybe even just a sweet spot of where you focus your work on.
My work is, concentrated in 2 areas. Again, as you mentioned, problematic sexual behaviors, helping men to overcome those, manage them, basically, but also in helping men to become more emotionally developed, more emotionally mature. If I had to summarize all of it for you, basically, I believe my work is all about transformation. It's transformation.
Love that.
That's what I'm really focused on. It is not about just let's stop this behavior. Yes, we want to do that, but ultimately what we want is let's go back. Because when we start to go back and look at, okay, where did this all go wrong? We see that it's not just, it becomes the idea of, you know what, there is an intimacy problem. There's an intimacy problem here. And a lot of it has to do with the inability to bond fully. And because of that inability to bond, men seek out distractions because we hunger for bonding. We hunger for those connections. We just don't know it. We're oblivious to all of it. And that's where the book of Why Men Struggle to Love, that was the topic that touched upon. We're oblivious to what we really need. So therefore we're seeking it in other areas.
It's brilliant. I ask you one question and you're dropping nuclear bombs and aces of spades already in the intro. So I love it. You also have completed your PhD. Talk a little bit about that. That is a monstrous achievement. So congrats to you for that.
Thank you. I did. It was in Christian studies. I did more of a focus, especially with my dissertation, in the area of Christian addiction counseling. And part of what I needed to do with all of that was put together a master's graduate program, which I did, and that was some undertaking. It was amazing, and I was so grateful for that opportunity to do that. And it's interesting. By the time you get to that point of education, you think, wow, you know what? I know a lot about what's going on in this field. I've been in it for quite some time. I've done so much work. You can see I've read so many books behind me here. And then you realize, oh my gosh, there's so much more to learn.
Right.
So it was a wonderful experience. It was a humble experience for me. I don't really go out there and tout the PhD very much, but sure, it's very honoring when someone sits there and says, Dr. Capparucci.
Well, I love the fact, and for those of you that come from faith, I'm sure you'll appreciate the evolution, if you will, of wisdom and knowledge within the field of caring for those in faith without just saying, man, just pray harder, take every thought captive, and you're just not praying hard enough. And, God is faithful. And that just gets to be, quite honestly, I'm going to use a word that I hope doesn't offend the listener or viewer, but that's absurd. We are in 2024, and there is so much more help available. For those of you that don't come from faith, what you're not going to hear today is this big faith-filled, irrelevant, unusable approach to problematic sexual behaviors or betrayal trauma or any of that. You're going to hear a very safe, welcoming message that Eddie's going to give as he answers questions that provides real hope, real wisdom, tangible examples of things that you can do to overcome, whether it be problematic sexual behaviors or betrayal trauma, or just difficulty saving your relationship, or, oh my gosh, saving yourself from the self-sabotage that you have brought upon your own life, right?
I don't want to say that you set the bar really high for me here, but you definitely.
I've got confidence in your ability to come through today. It's going to be Dr. Capparucci. It's going to be a great time together. So I got all the faith in you. So I want to launch out. What I think people are starting to realize is that it's one thing to say, let's save our marriage after betrayal or addiction. And they get out there and they maybe start to forgive, and they start to do stuff, as my great buddy James Anir would say, above the fold, above the page. They're doing the stuff like, oh, full disclosure, and we're talking about reminders and triggers, and we're trying to do all that. And then they hit this point, Dr. Capparucci, where they realize there's so much more to this. And you and I, in our practices, in our coaching, start to talk about family of origin or the inner child work. How does the inner child, and maybe you're going to have to convince a small part of people that we have an inner child and that is operating, and that's actually going on below the fold, behind the scenes, in the subconscious. So start with maybe just a little bit of thoughts on, hey, you have an inner child, it's there, it's undeniable, and then how it shows up in recovery work.
Definitely. But first, I have to ask you, stop calling me Dr. Capparucci.
It's coming.
Enough to call me Eddie. So the inner child, okay, let's talk about what the inner child is not first. The inner child is not a separate entity of a person, okay? It's not like you have dissociative identity disorder, right? That you have multiple personalities. It is not schizophrenia, okay? The inner child is you. And the inner child is a representation of many of the pain points that you struggled with and suffered when you were younger that still haunt you today. The problem is you're unaware of it. Many of those things that are there, they are suppressed or repressed memories. Now, let me just jump real fast. I'll jump to the amygdala, right? Most people understand what the amygdala is, that emotional warehouse. Well, your inner child really lives in your amygdala, because the amygdala, along with the cortex, they both develop memories. The cortex, okay, which we do our rational thinking, such, they develop memory based on imagery, okay? They remember things, sounds, smells, different things like they remember that. The amygdala developed memories based on associations, okay? It's just based on association. So therefore, and we go back to a very classic experiment that was done back in the early 1900s, where they were looking to try to figure out what brought on these types of phobias. And what they would do, they showed a little boy a Santa Claus beard, like, mask. But whenever they showed it to him, they'd make this loud noise. So whenever the kid saw the Santa Claus mask or saw somebody with a beard, he would be terrified. He was terrified by beard. The beard's not a threat. Okay. It was just the association that happened. Now turn back to the cortex for a moment. And there with memories, that is going to be if you were in a car crash and you saw that car crash, you felt that car crash, all of that, that is going to be a memory that is going not be by association, but something you actually latch onto. So why am I going into all of that? To demonstrate the fact that the inner child is driven by raw emotions that are negative and painful that still wind up harming us today. Again, we don't realize it because what happened with the inner child, there are different triggers that set him off based on what happened in the past. Well, when that happens, someone who's dealing with something such as problematic sexual behaviors, they don't know how to sit with this emotional pain. They don't know how to sit with emotional distress. So what they do, and you develop this at a very young age, is you develop a coping strategy of, I won't think about it. I'm not going to think about that because there's nobody there to guide them along, to show them how do you deal with pain? All right, let me, again, emotional pain. Oh, you know what, honey, I've been through this myself. Let me talk to you about it. There's no one doing that. So they have to deal with it.
Because it's not, this isn't going to be a hate your parents episode and blame your parents for everything, but it goes without stating that the fact is, it probably typically wasn't modeled for us. We probably didn't have a parental figure or a caregiver sit down and say, now, Sam, you have to be able to put words to your emotions, and it's okay for you to feel, and it's okay for you to be upset and use your voice. Here's boundaries, here's guidelines, but let me nurture you and let me love you and let me teach you how to use your voice to express your needs and express your wants and be able to be vulnerable. I got, and God bless her, she worked hard. Hey, stop crying. Go play baseball, go do this, go play with Legos, but stop this, shut it down. And many of us get the same. So we learn coping strategies or maladaptive coping mechanisms, or we find survival tactics that become problematic in our marriages and our relationships, right?
You nailed it. Exactly what happens. And again, those behaviors, which may start out when we're younger, too much television, too much food, too much sugar, too much fantasy, not sexual fantasy, fantasy in general.
Right.
They then change out as we get into our adolescence, our teen years, our adult years, that we find things that are more stimulating or more numbing for us one way or the other.
Exactly right. Okay, so we launch out into recovery and we start to go, okay, Sam, okay, Eddie, it's irrefutable that I have an inner child. And now this stuff is showing up in my relationship. Is it safe to say that many times we are fighting battles with our spouses that actually are with our inner child, or we are projecting or even transferring, and there's a large debate on transference and projection. We won't get into it, but at the end of the day, we can have issues with our spouse that is actually more rooted in childhood than it is in our relationship. Is that accurate?
It is 100% accurate. And that's why one of the things that we do when we're doing the inner child work and we're trying to talk about those things that bring up conflict is who else is in the room?
Love it. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, it's not just you and your spouse or your partner. There are other people or circumstances from the past that are exacerbating your emotions at the moment. And what we need to be able to do is to remove them, get them out of the environment. So therefore, you're only dealing with the circumstances at hand. This comes back to, in the inner child model that I created, what I feel versus what is real. And we need to put that in place all the time. I mean, constantly with everything that we do, because what you feel versus what is real are usually two very different things. So we go through and we look at, okay, what are the emotions, those raw emotions that my inner child is bringing into the circumstance based on the negative event that just happened. And I sit there and I list them out, and maybe there's a dozen things that are going on. And that is where we usually, stop when we're in our addictive state, and we just run because it's too overwhelming. Instead, we're going to slow everything down, which is my number one rule of recovery. Slow everything down. And then we're going to take that list of raw emotions and we're going to move it over to rational thinking. And there, Sam, I'm going to throw out everything that's an assumption. I'm going to throw out everything that is fear-based. I'm going to throw out everything that seems to be childlike thinking. And what I'm going to have left are just things that I can prove based on facts. And that is something we can handle. It's not overwhelming. And now I can make a rational and healthy decision versus an irrational decision that, again, I'm not even thinking about what the consequences are going to be. I'm just running away. We're no longer running. We're going to sit. We're going to resolve this, and we're going to do it in an adult-like manner, not in a childlike manner as we've been doing most of our lives.
I just love the way you lay it out there in it's not a linear process, but you laid it out so beautifully there linearly. I was talking to a client just this morning in a session, and he told me about it. And I love this guy to death. He's such a lovable guy. And you love the lovables that are just like, oh, I love this guy. And then there's the other people. That's all we'll say. But I love this guy. And he said, and I know he's watching this right now, and he said, my wife did this and this and this. And I said, it's interesting. Do you see how you approached your wife exactly how you approached your mom when you were little? And he goes, nope, not at all, Sam. I go, really? And I laughed, and he looked at me, and I was like, uh-oh. And I said, well, let me lay it out for you. And I laid it out, and he literally put his head down and was like, oh my gosh. Isn't it true that we can, and this is going deeper, and we're going to go deep because I love the way you just laid all that out. We can recreate childhood patterns with our spouses. We can approach, let's do this dynamic. We as a male husband can approach our female wife in a way that recreates the way that we approached our mom when we were young. And that is monstrously problematic in trying to recover from infidelity because of the shame and the condemnation and all of that. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. Again, this goes back to what I said earlier, oblivious.
Yes.
Okay, we're actually oblivious that we are doing this. And again, because as we grew up, we developed these various habit strategies, a lot of them are strategies, for learning how to deal with particular emotional, distressful situations. And so therefore, instead of, oh, wait a second, you know what? This is a completely different individual. These are different, unique circumstances. No. We have a cookie cutter, and we bring that cookie cutter everywhere.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And it doesn't work everywhere. In fact, what it does, it winds up heightening the conflict, and we're trying to figure out, and we're sitting here and we're like, why isn't this working? Well, you know what? If you go back and you look, it didn't work in the past either. Many times
because we are, and you said it, oblivious, but in the subconscious, as Jung would say, or what have you, we are recreating the same pattern that happened when we were children, and we're not even aware of it. Then somebody comes along like Eddie and says, let me show this. So when you're sitting with a couple and you've got a guy, or in fairness, maybe it's a woman who's been unfaithful, or maybe it's the betrayed that is also kind of reenacting childhood patterns. You're sitting with them. And the male or the female is like, yeah, I don't see it, Eddie. I think this isn't that's fine. I've noticed that we, especially men, we're like, no, I'm just kind of a sissy and I'm just being immature and I just need to suck it up. And I just need to, as many men heard during the 70s and 80s, we just need to grow a pair and we just need to tough it up. That doesn't work. But Eddie, speak to why that doesn't work and what does work.
Yeah, well, that doesn't work because what we're doing is we're being pigeonholed into emotions, one singular type of an emotion, okay? Which is, again, I'm going to be tough. I'm going to be able to work through this. That's it. And therefore, we have eliminated, as we've done before in the past, all of the other emotions will really help us to solve the problem. But without that, we're never going to get to the point where we need to be. So therefore, again, because if you look at it, especially when I look at men who are emotionally underdeveloped, and 9 out of 10 that I work with are, they don't have the skill set to be able to bond successfully in a good way. They think they are. It feels like they're bonding, but they're not. There's no depth to it because they don't have any depth. So what they're doing, they're really living a very incomplete life. And I'll just give you a quick little example. I remember years ago, I had a client who, it was a spring day. I had been working with him for several years. He'd done great work. And he came in, he was looking out the window and he goes, tell me, he goes, are the leaves brighter this year, greener than they've been in the past? They just seem to be so vibrant. And I just kind of chuckled. And I'm like, actually, they're about the same color. I go, you're just noticing them now. You're more alive. And that's what it is. We are just existing in many cases. We're not living.
I love that. And I think that you said something really interesting is that it's all very interesting. But when you say that we don't have any depth, but we think we do. We're like, no, I'm living it, dude. I'm close with my wife. I'm close with, my husband, but we don't. What are some signs off the top of your head that maybe we could share, that you could share to help some of the men understand, here's what depth really is?
Let me go to what depth isn't. Depth, because in many cases, what happens is we mistaken physical intimacy for emotional intimacy.
Amen.
Okay? Let me show you how much I love you by how many orgasms I can give you. Show me how much you love me by being physical with me. Okay.
Yeah.
That's not, God designed us to create relationships based on emotional intimacy. That's the foundation. And then we're supposed to take physical intimacy and sprinkle it in to enhance it. We have it just the opposite. So what does it look like when you really are engaging from an emotional standpoint? I'll give you one word: sacrifice. I'm sacrificing. And that means, you know what? Yes, there's things I would love to do right now, things I want to do, but you know what? What are her needs? Let me step outside. Or what are his needs? Let me be outwardly focused versus inwardly focused. It is about curiosity. And I don't mean curiosity about things and such. You have many different, you can be curious about sports and politics and entertainment. I'm talking about curiosity about the depth of a person. I can see that you're off somewhat today. I see what's going on. Talk to me more about it. Spending that time to really understand and throw yourself into, you've been apart from your partner all day long. Throw yourself in. Like, I want to know what you went through today. I want to kind of follow through what has happened with you.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful what you're saying. Another word for that we could use is attunement, right? Help me attune to you and stop. I'm going to step on some toes and stop taking this. Well, you should attune to me and you should care about my day? And do you know what I've had gone through? And this is a dynamic. I hate to say it this way, but look, when there's been infidelity or addiction, the onus is on us, the unfaithful, to be able to say, hey, I've made this year, 2 years, 10 years, whatever amount of time about myself and my own needs. And isn't it truthful that I said that a bad way. I'm going to say it a better way. Isn't it accurate to think that there should be a point in the heart and in the mind and in the actions of the unfaithful that they say, I made my life about me. I need to shift and make it about you. How can I attune to you? How can I support you while I do my own work? It doesn't mean that I don't do my work and I just make you the focus. I do my work, but my work is evident in how I selflessly attune and care about my partner. Is that accurate?
The actions that you're going to take. You're absolutely right. There has to be a 180 that is done there. Here's the problem. The inner child. The inner child doesn't want to do that.
Why not?
Because the inner child's afraid. The inner child is afraid that if I don't, because remember, the inner child learned a long time ago, all right, there is no one here for me to emotionally assist me. There's nobody here who's gonna listen. Nobody here gonna understand what my needs are. There's nobody here gonna help me with my emotional distress. I have to do it all myself.
Okay, right? Brilliant. I am on the edge of my seat. So I have to do it myself, which means I'm going to do what?
I'm going to be more inwardly focused. Okay, that's what I'm going to be. And I'm not going to trust. I'm not going to put things out there. I'm going to deceive and lie at times because I feel like I need to, even when I don't. But I feel like if I do tell the truth, somehow it's going to come back on me and I'm going to get in trouble for something. So therefore, again, it's almost like in a way hiding part of yourself from your spouse. And this is when I go back to the idea that we don't fully bond because we can't, because our inner child doesn't trust. The inner child is fearful that no one will be there. And so therefore, with that, as we continue to move forward in our relationship, there's something off. There's something missing. And a lot of times the spouse can pick this up. I mean, they're like, there's something just not right. But you know what? He or she, they do everything else okay. It's good. It's probably just me. It's just me. And then all of a sudden, the floor falls out. And it's like, damn. It wasn't just me. It was there all the time. How stupid was I to not, go deeper and try to figure out what was happening here, to hold their feet to the fire. So, again, I hope that answers your question, but the inner child is going to fight us in trying to bond completely with the person that we say that we, are in love with. And that's why we have to be able to learn the skill set. The inner child's not bad. It's not a bad child. It's not an evil child. Okay.
I was just going to bring that up. The inner child is not sitting here saying, I'm going to mess with you people today. I'm going to sabotage. I'm coming to wreck stuff today. The inner child's not doing that. The inner child is unhealed, unseen, uncared for, lost in a sea of what about me? And it's coming through our adult self. And I interviewed a dude named John Lee, who's a brilliant author, wonderful guy who talks about regression, and when regression is when we leave the present moment and we go back to a time of our life when, choicelessness is synonymous with regression, where we feel like we don't have a choice. So let me ask you, for the unfaithful man or woman that's sitting here listening to this and they think, I think I see this now. This is operating in my life. I'm starting to maybe give credence to the fact that as Rick Reynolds used to say to me, I'd like you to consider the possibility that perhaps you are not seeing the full story. And so as the unfaithful listens and goes, I will consider the possibility that maybe I'm not seeing the full story and I have this inner child in me. What are some practical next steps that they can do to start to do healing and to do work with the inner child?
Well, the first thing they need to be able to do is to find someone who's trained in being able to do inner child work. I have trained probably about 60 different clinicians right now who do that. We have people who are training on a regular basis. Because again, you can go pick up the book, Going Deeper, How the Inner Child Impacts Your Sexual Addiction. You can do that, but you really need somebody, to your point before, what you just said, there are other possibilities here. And you may not be able to see all of those. The biggest problem I see with someone who tries to do it on their own is they continue to look at circumstances through the eyes of their adult self. And they don't look at it through the eyes of their 5-year-old, 7-year-old, 12-year-old. That's the way you have to look at it. How did it impact that child? What did you feel then? Because today you'll minimize it, you'll justify it. It wasn't that big a deal. Other people suffered a lot more than I did. But to you back then, right. Oh my God. It was like the end of the world.
Exactly.
You passed that note in class and it got intercepted that you liked this girl. And then, before you know it, everybody's teasing you. And it's like, oh my gosh, you just want to run off. You want to go to a different school and you can't. It was horrible.
Right.
Today you go, oh, what a stupid story that was. That was crazy. But you have to go back because that, again, that sense of rejection, the sense of humiliation plays out today in things that happen in your life. It's not the same circumstances. It's probably not even, something that's going to cause you distress, but it feels like it. This is that idea, what you feel versus what is real. Two different things, and we have to distinguish. So therefore, we find somebody, they help to walk us through it. You identify there are 12 inner children. You decide to pick the one that you resonate with. The most important thing is, however, not so much the children that you select. It is the core emotional triggers that activate each of those kids. And you have to identify what are my triggers. So therefore, for example, you know what? I don't measure up. Maybe that is one of them. So something happens and you get that message, maybe indirectly, oh, he thinks I don't measure up. Your kid's activated. Yeah. He's ready to run. So therefore, we need to be aware. Again, remember, we go back to oblivious. We need self-reflection. Why? I answered the why question. I'm a big why guy. Why do I think, feel, and do the things I do?
Right. That absolutely
is going to empower you.
And you said it best. So in your example, if we sense, and I use the word activated every day. I love that word. We're not saying you're flooding and you're just completely spiraling, but you're certainly activated. Well, he thinks I don't measure up, or she thinks I don't measure up. And now, isn't it safe to say that we will have a $5,000 reaction to a $100 problem? Because if it's hysterical, it's historical. Something bigger has been tapped into, but we are oblivious and we're not aware of it. But our spouse or our partner is like, bro, you're losing your mind over whether or not to take the dog out because something triggered you and you're off to the races, right?
Yeah, well, you know what? My wife actually pointed this out to me just 2 days ago. She goes, I cannot believe your reaction of what's going on here. What is going on with your inner child? We all do it. I still do it occasionally myself. It happens. It is not a $5,000 response. It's more like a $50,000 response. It's the top. It's over the top. And again, it's because other people or circumstances are in the room. You have been triggered. Your pain point that you feel at that moment, which is legitimate. Okay, that pain point's legitimate, but it has been exacerbated.
Yeah.
Beyond what it should be. And so therefore you now are reactive instead of responsive.
I love that. I think it's beautiful. It's beautifully said, that whole process. So as we're almost done here, maybe take 2 minutes. We've talked a lot about how the inner child gets in the way, the trouble it can cause, and being activated and haywire and all of that. But can they heal? Can they overcome it? Can they get it under control? Can they actually no longer be a prisoner to the inner child? Talk about that. And then I'll ask you one more question and we'll say goodbye.
That's a very, very good question. The inner child is not going away. The inner child is not going away. However, the pain points, and again, the pain points are those core emotional triggers that you identify. Over time, as you continue to work with your inner child, as those pain points come up, and you immediately address it, go there. And the thing the inner child wants to know is, you got this? Is there an adult here who's going to help me?
Right.
Oh, do I not have to be fearful? That's what the kid wants. And the more you do that, what happens is those core emotional triggers, they start to desensitize. They don't fully go away. I just told you I had one a few days ago. Okay, they don't fully go away. But usually you can pick them up quicker, and usually they're not as powerful as they've been. But the only time they'll really get more out of sort, and this is what happened to me, was if you're drained mentally, emotionally, physically, or spiritually. You're drained in any of those areas, then you're not paying that much attention to your inner child. And therefore, then he's like, whoa, hey, here. Right. Okay, let me get your attention. I'm going to get your attention. I'm going to step on your foot or kick you in the knee. And that's what happens. So no, he doesn't fully go away. But again, you can make it so that you definitely have a lot of influence and control on him so that your behaviors in most circumstances will be justified based on what circumstances are.
And we can stay in our adult self, because when we are in our adult self, we can actually do work to be our highest and best self, so that our spouse, our partners, our coworkers, our children, our literal children are coming in contact with our adult self, who is safe, reliable, healthy, and modeling mature behavior. So, Eddie, if they want to buy your books, if they want to read more from you or watch more videos from you or even work with you, how do people find you? What's the best way for people to get in touch with you or buy your books?
All my books are available exclusively on Amazon. So if you go to Amazon, type in Capparucci, they'll find, the listing of them there. To reach out to me, especially maybe if you want to get on the mailing list for when the new book will be coming out for the betrayed partner, is innerchildmodel@gmail.com. Again, innerchildmodel@gmail.com. There's also a website about the inner child, and there's also an online program for people who really can't afford therapy, but I walk you through the entire process, and that is www.innerchild-sexaddiction.com. Again, innerchild-sexaddiction.com.
I love it, Eddie. You've been a breath of fresh air for so many people who are watching and listening. It is just wonderful to have you back in now that I'm on my own. We'll have to have you come back in more and more. And certainly when the new book comes out, we'll have to have you come back in again. So as always, thank you for coming in. And for those of you that are watching and listening, on behalf of Eddie and myself, there is hope for you. I don't care where you've been, what you've been through. I don't know about your relationship, but I know about you, because if Eddie can find restoration and healing and hope, and if I And you'd have to work really hard to screw up more than I have in life if I can find hope and healing and restoration. And I do come from faith, so I have found purpose multiple times in life after really screwing up. For those of you that don't come from faith, you do have purpose and value and meaning in your life. And we can prove it to you if you work with someone like this. So don't give up. Don't throw in the towel. Maybe it's time to do some inner child work. So you can reach out to me at samshealingpodcast@gmail.com. If you want help finding Eddie or any other resources, by all means, please reach out. Eddie, it's been a joy and it's been an honor. Thank you again so much.
Let's make sure it's not so long next time, though.
Absolutely. Well said. Thank you for watching. We'll see you on the other side.